Good morning, students. Now, this is the second lecture on consumer protection, and the act that we'll be discussing is Consumer Protection Act 1986. Though it has been replaced by the Act of 2019, but since it is in your syllabus that 1986 is mentioned, so we cannot skip discussing about 1986 provisions as well, along with the provisions as given under section in Act 2019. Now, to start with, I would like to make this quote, which is given by one of the American writer and editor, that says that it is good to have money and the things that money can't buy. But it's good too to check up once in a while and make sure you haven't lost the things money can't buy. Now, here the writer is saying that when we buy a good or service, we really have adequate knowledge about its quality and safety. We are quite concerned about the fact that we can get cheated. Now, this is when the need for Consumer Protection Act arises, or the laws relating to the protection of consumer rights arises. Now, if we see in past a few years, we see that the subject of consumer protection has become a matter of great importance, a matter of public concern, because of unscrupulous business tactics that are taken up by the producers, manufacturers, that seriously affects nations' well-being and also the interest of the consumers, and thus contribute to social unrest and causes undue financial distress to consumers. Now, it is an undeniable fact that consumers are the one who makes payment for the services or goods that are consumed by them. So, since consumer plays a very vital role in the economic system of a nation, it is also important to protect their rights to a greater extent. Sir, it is the impact of effective demand that the producers are getting motivated to produce more and more. And the absence of this effective demand, the sale and the production, manufacturing of the goods and services will also come down. As a result, the economy of a nation will not flourish. So, this is the reason that we say the economic activity flourishes when consumers can trust producers. But the consumers must have reasonable ground for trust. Consumers will then value not only quality and safety, but they will also the assurance of quality and safety will is going to be there. So therefore, when we say that trust depends on the assurance. Producers generally gain this assurance by building up, expanding their own good reputations. And they provide this good reputation by providing good quality of goods and services. They demonstrate good quality, the safety products, and make the content of promise clear and publicly understood by means of advertisements, displays, labeling, packaging. They are portraying themselves to be of better quality than others. But when some form of damage or undue hazard arises, then the trust of the consumer goes off. And this is here where Consumer Protection Act plays an important role. So we say that since very many decades, with the experience of operation of Consumer Protection Act, it has shown that it has gained popularity and acceptance. And the legal preference of injured consumer is now to enforce their rights under Consumer Protection Act. It is that act that commands the consumer support because of its cost effectiveness, user friendliness. In fact, when we talk about Consumer Protection Act, it creates a sense of legal awareness among the public, and at the same time bring disinterest to approach traditional courts that are more time consuming, expensive. So Consumer Protection Act has enabled consumer to approach justice within a reasonable time and with less expenses. It has changed the legal mindset of public and made them think first of their remedies under the Consumer Protection Act, regardless of the nature of their case. So, in short, we say that Consumer Protection Act has helped in instilling that confidence among the public, and the way in which the consumers are taking up consumer cases under Consumer Protection Act, considering the advantages that are included in the Consumer Protection Act. So, the greatness of the Consumer Protection Act is basically its flexible nature, wider jurisdiction, inexpensive justice that it is providing. One can find in Consumer Protection Act a mixture of principle of tort and contracts. It is more simpler than any other aspect or any other litigation or proceedings that are taken up in regular courts. So we say that shorthandly, we can say that it is that term that indicates all the many differences aspect of general law. There are different aspects that are put together under one head. Basically, Consumer Protection Act liberalizes the strict traditional rules of standing and empowers consumers to proceed under Consumer Protection Act. So we say that the even why we say that it is more user friendly, it is pro consumers, because under Consumer Protection Act, consumer groups, central state governments are all empowered to lodge complaint. Even a consumer can lodge a complaint. So this liberalization shows the care that a consumer is given, that care that has been taken to represent and fight for the cause of weak, indifferent, and illiterate consumers, basically. So the novelty of Consumer Protection Act is the inclusion of both goods and services within its ambit, and it has been enlarged after the amendment of 2019. So consumers can bring suits for defective products as well as for deficiency of services. In event of any deficiency, all services, whether provided by government, private companies, can be questioned. It has liberalized rigid procedural requirements, introduced simpler and easy method of access to justice, right? So to proceed under CPA, the consumer need only to pay a nominal fees and need not send any notice to opposite party. A simple letter addressed to the Consumer Forum draws enough attention for a litigation under Consumer Protection Act. So another major procedural flexibility is the is the option that the consumer has to engage a lawyer. So if the consumer prefers, he can represent himself. So this is one of the another advantage of having getting doing any taking up litigation under Consumer Protection Act. So it has initiated a legal revolution, and it has given consumer this right to fight for their own cases. So we say that there are many objectives with which Consumer Protection Act has been incorporated, have been enacted. So we say that what are the, if you see the statement of object and reason of the act, then it states that there are few rights, that is right to be protected against marketing of goods which are hazardous to life and property, the right to be informed about the quality, quantity, potency, purity, standard and price of goods to protect the consumer against unfair trade practice, the right to be assured wherever possible access to an authority of goods at competitive price, the right to be heard and to be assured that consumers' interests will receive due consideration, the right to seek redressal against unfair trade practice or any kind of unscrupulous exploitation of consumers, and right to consumer education also. So these are objectives that are sought to be promoted and protected by Consumer Protection Act, and it provides speedy and simple redressal to consumer dispute. It includes a quasi judicial machinery which is set up at district, state, and central level. And these quasi judicial bodies observe the principle of natural justice and have been empowered to give relief of specific nature and award a compensation to consumers wherever appropriate. Penalties are also provided under Consumer Protection Act. So when we talk about Consumer Protection Act that was enacted in the year 1986, there were many other laws where the consumer can make a complaint against the producers and manufacturers to resort to any kind of remedy. They could go to regular courts, and the doctrine of Cva tempter was applicable. That is between buyers beware, where the doctrine held the buyer totally responsible, although the seller was aware of the defect and deficiency. Now, this doctrine stated that buyers must keep his eyes and ear open and mind open, active while buying anything. So buyers were made responsible for any kind of thing, but now the standards have been changing. This position has been changed after the amendment of 2019 that included the concept of product reliability, under which a manufacturer service provider has to compensate if the goods or services cause injury, harm to consumer in event of goods or services turned to be defective or any kind of deficiency is there. So has this was the term that was not previously defined but has been taken up, that has shifted the burden from buyer to seller now. So sellers are under the liability to provide adequate quality of product to the buyers, and if they are not doing so, can be taken up under the act. So thus, when we talk about Consumer Protection Act, it has helped consumer to avoid the cumbersome procedural that was included under the traditional court system, and has helped them to get the relief within a few months or in a given particular time period. So this is the importance of Consumer Protection Act when we talk about Consumer Protection Act. So there are few examples that where you can say the exploitation of consumer can take place in various forms. These are few examples like after sale service provider television set charge 200 rupees, and where the ticket is tickets issued to different passengers on the same seat. Supply of cooking gas cylinders, which is found, and then cooking gas cylinder is to be found underweight. So like this, there are various examples that we will find under Consumer Protection Act, and in our day-to-day life where consumers are cheated, and we can find a remedy and relief under Consumer Protection Act. So in order to understand the working of Consumer Protection Act, it is important to also understand the basic concepts. Now, various definitions that we'll be taking up for understanding the working is as to who is a consumer. Now, the section that is mentioned is the new section, which is covered under Act of 2019, and the sections that are provided at the on the right side are the sections that were there in the Act of 1986. Though we'll be considering the Act of 2019 for our study for explanation. So when we, but you should remember which act, which section talks about which concept in the previous act. So consumer, who are consumers, what we understand by goods and services, who can make a complaint, what we understand by complaint, then for what grounds you can make a complaint, that can include defect and deficiencies, who is a manufacturer, and who is a person, what do you understand by restricted trade practices, what who are traders, what do you mean by unfair contract, which is inserted after 2019, what do you understand by unfair trade practices. Though we'll be talking about the differences also, but we will take up the concepts first as to what we mean by these small concepts. And there are other definitions also that have been incorporated after 2019, because it has enlarged the scope of consumers services that are provided by the service providers. So it include the, and also has extended the responsibility, and these definitions will be important as when we'll be doing the distinction between 1986 and 2019 as well, because these are the are very important definitions that have changed the scenario, the way Consumer Protection Act has been was looked into, and by enlarging the scope and ambit of Consumer Protection Act. So these definitions that are there are that deals with what is advertisement, what do you mean by e-commerce, electronic service provider. So these are certain concepts that are included in the Consumer Protection Act to include even the consumers who are using their goods and services online. So what do you understand by endorsement, what kind of endorsement is valid and not valid, and what will bring an action against you if you're making any misconceived advertisement is there, or wrong endorsement is given by you, then what are your liabilities when you are portraying the not the exact or actual quality of the product to the consumers. What is harm, what is injury have also been added after 2019, and it has included various harms like damage to any property, personal injury, illness or death, mental agony, emotional distress, attendant to personal injuries or illness, or any loss of a consortium or services, or loss in resulting from harm referred to in subclause 1 and 2 or 3, but shall not include any harm caused to product itself or any damage to the property or breach. It should, the harm should be that of the person and not to the product, as the definition says. Then it also discussed that what do you mean by injury, what is do we understand by misleading advertisement, because this is one of the ground that can bring an action, on which a consumer can bring an action against the manufacturers or producers where there is misleading advertisements, thus giving wider rights and scopes to the consumer. Then the concept of a product seller has also been added under the concept under the Consumer Protection Act. So these are a few other definitions that have been added, but for the purpose of your syllabus, we'll be focusing more on these aspects as to what are consumer goods and services, what are the rights and duties of consumers, and with respect to the authorities under which you can make a claim. So we'll be focusing on Consumer Protection Act 1986, though we'll be side by side talking about 2019 as well. I hope today's lecture was worthy. Thank you so much. Have a nice day. Take care.